Okay, we're going to continue with filing status. We've talked about who must file and how to start a tax return. And we've found out that filing status impacts whether you have to file a tax return. So now we're going to learn the guidelines or the criteria for each of the filing status. There are 5 filing statuses: single, married filing jointly, married filing separately, head of household, and qualifying widower. Note, you are considered married or unmarried on December 31st, and we want the taxpayer to choose the most advantageous filing status. The first filing status that we'll talk about is single. Single means that you're not married, you are legally separated or divorced, or widowed before the beginning of the tax year and did not remarry. The next filing status is married filing jointly. And these are the guidelines for that filing status: married and living together, or married and living apart but not legally separated, or common law married, or surviving spouse who did not remarry before December 31st. This includes legally married same-sex couples and residents or citizens married to a non-resident alien. And we're going to talk about those requirements a little later. Married filing separately. We're not going to spend a great deal of time on it because it is out of scope. We don't prepare married filing separate tax returns, and it disqualifies the taxpayer for most credits. Filing status head of household, and we see this a lot at our sites. Unmarried or considered unmarried on December 31st paid more than half the cost of keeping up a home for the required period of time and had a qualifying person living in their home for more than half of the year. And there can only be one head of household per residence. Sometimes we'll have a couple that comes in and for whatever reason they can't file a married filing joint tax return, and they have 2 children, and one spouse wants to take one child, or one taxpayer wants to take one child, and the other taxpayer wants to take the other child, and both claim head of household. Well, that is strictly a no-no. The person that provided more than half the cost of the household would be entitled to the unmarried head of household status, and the other individual would have to file as single. Also, sometimes you find 2 sisters living together. And there is a chart that we'll take a look at a little later that helps you determine head of household. Okay, for the head of household filing status, you have to be considered unmarried, file a return separate from spouse, and paid more than half the cost of keeping up their home, and lived apart from their spouse during the entire 6 months of the year, provided the main home for more than half the year for the dependent child, stepchild, or foster child. Okay, let me go back. Now, the head of household filing status, like I say, we see that a lot at our sites. But if these if these criteria are met, then they could be considered head of household. Because you could actually be married but considered unmarried based on these stipulations. This is the chart that I was speaking about earlier, cost of keeping up a home. And these are some of the expenses: property taxes, mortgage interest, rent, utilities. Whichever person provided more than half of these, paid more than half of these expenses, they would be considered to be head of household. We're going to spend quite a bit of time on the head of household filing status because, like I said, we get a lot of taxpayers at our sites that meet this criteria. Now, who is a qualifying person qualifying you to file as head of household? If the person is your qualifying child, such as your son, daughter, or grandchild who live with you more than half the year and meets certain other tests, then, and if he or she is single, then that person is a qualifying person, whether or not you can claim the person as a dependent. Now, for a qualifying relative who is your father or mother, you have to be able to claim him or her as a dependent, and this would be a qualifying person. You can't claim him or her as a dependent, and that's not a qualifying person. Qualifying relative other than father or mother. And you'll note that your father or mother does not have to live in the same household with you if certain other criteria are met. Qualifying relative other than your father or mother. He or she lived with you more than half the year, and you can claim him or her as a dependent and is in one of the following categories: son or daughter, descendants of a brother or sister, an ancestor or sibling of your father or mother, step brother, step sister. Then this is a qualifying person. You will notice that you do not see cousin there. He or she didn't live with you more than half of the year, then they are not a qualifying person. He or she isn't related to you in one of the ways listed above and is your qualifying relative only because he or she lived with you all year and a member of your household. And we see this quite a bit. This is like a companion or a friend. Then this is not a qualifying person. You can't claim him or her as a dependent, then this is not a qualifying person. But you'll use that chart on page 54 to make a determination about head of household filing status. Now, we do see qualifying widower as a filing status, and that was one that was listed. In order to qualify for this filing status, you must be entitled to file a joint return for the year the spouse died, regardless of actually filed a joint return. Have a spouse who died in either the 2 prior years. Must not remarry before December 31st. Have a child, stepchild, or adopted child who qualifies as a dependent. Live with child in taxpayer's home all year paid more than half the cost of keeping up the home for the year. So, if a taxpayer died in 2021, a joint return could be filed for that year. But for the following 2 years, 2022 and 2023, as long as these other criteria were met, then that person could take the filing status of qualified widower. Okay, we're going to now go into the poll questions. Poll question number 6. Jan's husband moved out of their home in February of the tax year and has not returned. Jane provides all the cost of keeping up the home for herself and her 2 dependent children. Jane refuses to file a joint return with her husband. What filing status should she use? Okay, we're going to give you a minute or so to answer that poll question. Okay, we're going to go ahead and end the poll. If you answered head of household, then you are correct. I'll share our results. May have been a little confusion on that one. The reason we can use the head of household filing status, even though Jane is still married to her husband, she meets the requirement to be considered unmarried for filing status purposes and qualifies to file as head of household. Although technically she could file as married filing separately, which we don't do, it would not be to her advantage to do so because you lose a lot of credits when you file married filing separately. Okay. We're going to go to the next poll question. Okay, which is poll question number 7. Kate's unmarried 16-year-old daughter, Shelby, lived with her all year. Kate is single, provided half of Shelby's support, and paid all the costs of keeping up the home. What filing status should she use? Okay, we're going to take a minute or so to answer that question. I feel like I explained it well. Okay, we're going to end the poll. So if you answered head of household, which 90% of you did, you are correct. Shelby is Kate's qualifying child dependent. We're going to go to the next poll question. Question number 8. Okay, sorry for that delay. This is, be sure we're all on the same page. This is poll question number 8. Since her spouse died 5 years ago, Joan has lived with her friend, Mary Ann, who is also a widow. Jane is a U.S. citizen, is single, and lived with Mary Ann all year. Joan had no income and received all of her support from Mary Ann. What is Mary Ann's filing status? Okay, we're going to take a minute or so for this one. Okay, we're going to end the poll. I'll share the results. The correct filing status is single, and 60% of you got that correct. Now, Joan is not a qualifying person for head of household status because she is not a blood relative related to Mary Ann in one of the ways that was listed on the chart in the volunteer resource guide. She is Mary Ann's qualifying relative dependent only because she lived with Mary Ann all year as a member of the household. And I know this kind of gets a little confusing. Some thought this was a qualifying widower, but that filing status would not apply because there is no dependent child. And I explained why head of household would not work. Okay? We're going to launch the next poll question. Poll question number 9. Laura's spouse, Jim, died in September of the tax year. She has not remarried and provides all of the support for their dependent children, ages 8 and 10. What is Laura's filing status for this tax year? Okay, we're going to take a minute or so to respond to it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And this one was a little tricky. The correct filing status would be married filing jointly, not qualifying widower, because she is entitled to file a married filing joint tax return because the husband or her husband died during the tax year. Okay? Okay, that was the filing status, married filing jointly. Okay, now we're going to go to poll question number 10. Laura's spouse, Jim, died in September of last tax year. She has not remarried and provides all of the support for their dependent children, ages 8 and 10. What is Laura's filing status for this tax year? And we're going to give you a minute to respond. Okay, we're going to go ahead and end the poll. And you did pretty good on this one. 80% of you said qualifying widower, which is the correct answer. He died in 2020. It is now 2021. She has a dependent child, so she can file qualifying widower for 2021 and 2022 if she still has that dependent that she supported. Okay? All right, we're going to move on to the next poll question. And this is just showing you what the correct answer was. Okay. Question number 11. Seth lives alone and has never married. He does not support either of his parents. What filing status can he use? Okay, we're going to give you a minute to answer that question. Okay, we're going to end the poll. And I am impressed. 100% of you said single, and that is the correct filing status. Okay. I think that was our last poll question. Yes. Okay, just to kind of summarize what we've talked about, the most advantageous filing status with the lowest amount of tax is married filing jointly. Qualifying widower gets the same tax advantage as